Welcome to the At Sea Podcast. I'm your host, Justin McRoberts. The emphasis I've placed so far this season on the practice of poetry actually positions us to have some conversations, to continue some conversations that I care a whole lot about. Really specifically, beginning with this episode, a concentrated focus on the intersection and overlap between psychotherapy and religious practice. As someone who's benefited both from therapy and spiritual direction, this intersection is a place I experience a great deal of life, while also coming to a great deal of very complex and really interesting questions about what it means to be me, what it means to be human, what it means to have a relationship, what it means to be a person of faith. One of my favorite people working in that intersection, is KJ Ramsay. KJ works at that intersection as a therapist and an author, talks profoundly about issues of faith, and, it just so happens, has recently produced a volume of poems and prayers, which makes such a beautiful bridge into the heart of this conversation about what it means to be fully human, to value that which is beyond our understanding, and to dig really deeply and thoughtfully into the things we can and should understand, like brain chemistry. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I think you will as well. Check it out.
I'm taking the liberty to finish this little bit.
You can finish that little bit of, what is that, yogurt?
It's yogurt.
That is so Colorado.
Number 2 of the day, and I need
That's
to
fine.
make myself eat.
We can be the lunch spot. This is the lunch stop.
Yeah,
that's not even lunch, is it?
Really, it's 10 a.m. here.
Late breakfast, early lunch.
You know how book release season goes.
Yes, I do. How is it feeling for you?
By the way, so when is your book coming out?
My book comes out in May, end of May 30th.
May, okay.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
I'm thrilled.
You're thrilled? Okay.
I'm thrilled.
That's good.
Yes, I like the book a lot. So I'm happy with the book. I'm happy to put it out in the world. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled for it, to be honest.
That's awesome.
How's this feeling for you?
I spent a long time talking to my husband about that last night. I am an introvert, and book release season is like a lot of extroverting. A lot of like outside energy. But so I've like all this week I've been feeling that like, oh man, I totally overloaded my schedule, dreading this. And then yesterday I was like, you know what? I do not want to walk through this whole thing like dreading this. Like, I made this thing. I love it. So I spent some time last night just like looking through the book. My author copies came yesterday. I had one before, but it was like super beat up. And I was just like, I love what I made.
Oh,
it's beautiful. Like, I'm so glad I get to give this to people. And I got to tap into.
You got to kind of reattach yourself to the project like it was a piece of you.
Yeah. So, I wish I just felt great. But I feel like I'm like repositioning myself to receive the season as good and not just exhausting.
Having done it before, does it make a difference at all, or do you kind of re-experience the same? I don't want to say it that way. Like, does it? I don't want to ask the question like, do you get used to it? Because that's kind of a yes or no question. Having done it before, you come into the season, you have expectations. Is there more of like a self-awareness in it? Or is there more of like because it's not like, go ahead.
I see the same pattern in myself. Like, this is the third time I see this pattern in myself of like, the first time I just was excited at first, and then I was like, whoa, that was exhausting.
Yes, very tired of that.
Whoa, I didn't know how exhausting that was going to be. But then like second time, I did pretty well at like limiting my schedule. This time I have a better publicist. And so then I was like, that means, there's more on my schedule. And I didn't realize that I said yes to this much stuff. Ooh.
Yeah.
But I think I see the same pattern in myself of like, I like will get preemptively overwhelmed just by the number of things. And then
preemptively overwhelmed.
I dread it. Yeah. Yeah. Like I'll look like today.
Yep.
There's
I know.
I look at my schedule and like I know all these conversations are going to be good, but I'm already tired thinking about talking this much.
I got two thoughts on my brain. The one is like that it's a very like it's like preemptive sadness, which is like very Enneagram 4 kind of thing. It's like I know at some point this relationship's gonna have to change, and I'm already grieving that. And you're like, yes, but we've got a solid 2 years. I know, but I'm gonna spend at least 60% of that time grieving the loss of the thing that I have. Preemptive. Yeah. And the other part of it is there's a really interesting, I think it's interesting, and that's why I'm going to say it. There's a really interesting athletic parallel here insofar as like you can train and you do, and you get, stronger and faster or whatever the heck. And then there is still, regardless of anything, like day of the workout or the race or the long hike or whatever, there is still like, you're going to like it. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to be happy when it's done because you've done it before, and still have that like fluttery butterfly, like, oh my gosh, nervous thing all the time.
And you're also still going to be tired at the end.
Yes. I got friends who are trainers, and they're like those like badass CrossFit types. You're like, okay.
Oh wow, yeah,
yes, like good for you. Please stop posting things publicly. But they'll still like they'll go into a workout, and these are like the most in shape humans in the history of all humanity, and they'll still like 10 minutes before a workout, they're having like anxiety. They're like, I get nauseous before workouts. I get nervous. Like, this is so crazy. I don't even get nauseous and nervous before workouts anymore. I'm just like, this is gonna hurt a little bit, and it's
like I don't
just sadness. I think
I don't feel I don't get nervous for like the interviews or anything like that. It's just it's like I know during the conversation I will feel like lit up by talking and connecting, but it's the later on that I'm just like, I am a pile of mush now. Like,
what do you do at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, well, yesterday, which was it was clients and then like one book thing. I rowed, and that was so good. Just 15 minutes of rowing, and
rowed. Like, got it.
Yeah,
English
power rower.
Got it. Yeah. I was like on a bike, or no? You like row?
Yeah, I was rowing. We got a rower recently, and that felt really good. Just like move some things through, get some of that out. And then other times I've got like this for Christmas. I got a massage gun, and
those little torture devices. The little.
It's not torture. It feels so good.
I know exactly what it is. Like you bring it. I'm like, don't. Scares me to death.
I mean, you do have to be careful with them, but like I've been using that just kind of like get to physically kind of like help my body like let some stress out of through my skin.
Think about that combination of things. I got a massage thing. You have to be careful with it. That's really interesting. Like, I got this massage tool. I got to be real careful with it. It is also called a gun. So
it is called a gun. That is a very intense
word. That's where we're at with regards to self-care. There's a level of threat that they were entering to this.
No, it's good. It's just So that's where I'm at. I'm trying to receive book release season is a good thing. I don't know if you do this, but it's like I often will receive things that are genuinely good. I often will like experience them as grief.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm just trying to let that like be a thing,
because there are layers. There's so many layers to the thing where like there's the idea of the thing, and then there's the work of making the thing, and then there's the thing itself, And then
what it actually is.
And then there's the promotion piece, and then there's the relationship between the thing and other people, and then there's the feedback none of it is, it's all different things.
Yeah.
It's the thing itself is like you're in love with it.
Yeah.
The other pieces are like, that's where all like the soft emotional skills come in, and that stuff is harder.
Yeah, it's this. I think what I'm realizing is this transition into the release part is always a little hard for me.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not my favorite part of being an author. And that's okay. I like it when the book's been out for a while and it's a thing and you don't have to talk about yourself so much.
Do you experience any of that weird, and it is weird, that weird, not release grief, but like the finished grief where like you're done with the thing and you kind of wish you weren't, like you're done with it and it's in it, and not everyone does. You're done with it's sort of set in stone now. Like you've gone through a series of edits, you're finished, got a piece, it's done. Do you experience that sense of like it's maybe a grief, maybe an anxiousness of like, oh crap, not whether it works or not, but just sort of like you have to let it go, kind of like the it's a baby thing. Do you have that feeling?
Let it be what it is. I kind of do. I think it was less this time because I had already I was in the process of securing my next contracts, and so I know oh, I get to make another one of I get to make another two of these, and
you mean right after you finished this one, you were stepping into
right
the
after
logistics
while I was finishing the final edits on this one, I was pitching my next books and figuring out what I was going to be doing. And so it was kind of okay, it's fine, that can be its own thing, because I know that I have all this space to create more. So it was different this time, because that's the first time that I've had this is the first time I've been no, I know what I'm doing for the next 5 years. I've never had that in my life.
Really?
So I think that changed the experience. There was oh, I know kind of what I'm gonna get to create next, and there's gonna be more space to be adventurous, and therefore it doesn't have to feel sad that that's over, because there's all this space.
There's this phenomenon or experience that, this is gonna sound pedantic, the younger artists have with their projects. We talk about it in terms of you hear it, I've heard it often talked about with regards to it's this is your baby, it's the whole kill your darlings thing in editing. You feel so close to the project. One way to talk about this is to talk about this is your baby. I think that's a terrible analogy in so many ways. So I've never liked it, and now I know why. The thing that I understand now, having been through it 175 years ago when I started making art, but also listening to other people walk through their thing, is when you don't have a lot, when you haven't put a lot in the world, when you haven't released a lot of stuff, or the way Seth Godin talks about it, when you haven't shipped a lot, the entirety of who you are as an artist is literally wrapped up in the project in front of you.
Right.
And the idea of it being done and then not knowing either how it's going to go or what comes next is there is an anxiousness that comes.
I totally felt that with my first book. Yeah.
Yep. This is everything.
3 in, now it's
it's a book among other books. And
there will be more, and that's fine.
Totally. And trying to convince someone early in their process that hey, that's a good feeling, it's a good thing to feel less attached to your work. Trying to convince them of that, they're like, oh hell no, this is no, this is this is so precious to me. And then later down the road, you're like, honestly, I feel I released it, it's probably a B+, might be a B, it could be a B-. I'm not really concerned about it. I'm done. I'm happy. I'm happy that I did it. I'm ready for the next thing. It's a very different feeling. It's not the same kind of satisfying but my God, is there more peace?
Oh yeah, I prefer it this way. That has gotten better with every subsequent release, and it's been really nice. It's really nice to have more detachment.
If you have other projects you've got planned out for the next 5 years, that's a pretty steady pace with regards to shipping.
Yes,
because your 3-book releases in over the course of, really, when it comes down to, about like maybe 4 years.
Yeah, it was, the first book came out in 2020.
But you started that process. I mean, our conversation, you started the writing process for that.
Started it in fall of 2018.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
So that's a pretty serious pace with regards to actually writing, editing, producing, releasing, moving on. Yeah. And now you have more stuff. Is this by
the way, is this part for just for us or for the podcast?
You tell. I'm good. Gosh. We're just talking.
Okay, cool.
I'm recording everything. So if at some point you're like, hey, the thing I said about that one guy,
I haven't told people that I know what books I'm writing for the next 5 years.
Oh yeah, you don't have to give any details, but does the pace feel, is that sustainable is not the word I want to use. Is that energizing? Is that that's a lot to do? For some, for some of the authors or artists that I know that you and I both pay attention to, it can be 3 years between projects.
Yeah,
which for me is can you give me more of you, please? But for them, they don't want to put that much time and energy into productivity. Talk about that pace. That's a lot to have in your brain and to be planning for.
Right.
When you have this whole other job of actually being a therapist.
Right. Yes. Well, I had to, let's just say, when I got my next book contracts, at the end of the summer, was when we were decided where to go. I had to sit down with my agent, and we got a big whiteboard out and put out all the deadlines of manuscript due. Here's when copy edits would probably fall, or second round copy edits. Here's when the next one would be due. Because until I could make sure there was enough margin, it felt too overwhelming.
Personal margin?
Yeah, margin for having things go wrong, getting sick, needing a rest. I needed to make sure there was some wiggle room in my schedule before I could commit to being this is doable. Because I don't want to I want to practice what I preach. I want to have a good, grounded life.
Yeah.
But I love to write. I love to write, and I love to explore. And every time that I write a book, I discover things that I'm really curious about, that I want to write more about and just look into more. And for me, it's I feel like I got this great gift to let myself know I have the security of being able to be that curious and get paid for it for the next 5 years. That's awesome. I just feel really grateful. So
is that still the engine? Is curiosity still the engine for you? You don't feel like you're sliding into, and this would be a critique, and you'll hear it as that way. You don't feel like you're sliding into the expert posture where at some point in some people's careers, and you and I have both felt this with folks, I feel like you're talking at me at this point. We're not in conversation anymore. Is curiosity still your engine?
Yeah. I think sometimes people want me to be the expert.
Right. Especially with something like mental health. They want someone
with trauma.
Just tell me the truth and move on.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's harder for me there's been periods of letting myself own that I do have expertise, because I think I tend to I felt a lot of downplaying of that internally, toward myself in years past. But yeah, no, I'm just a big nerd still. I just really love, this morning, while I was getting ready, I'm reading Hour of the Land by Terry Tempest Williams.
Okay, cool.
And so it's like doing my hair, listening. I'm both reading it and listening, and just listening to her talking about like conservation efforts in Utah and like Canyonlands and Arches National Park was like beautiful and made me think about like my own, like, where am I being invited to be more of an activist? And I mean, that's the stuff that keeps me alive, is this like asking the questions and asking myself questions. So yeah, I think curiosity still drives it, and I think joy still drives the creative process for me, where it's like experiencing beauty and connection and delight, and wanting to like translate that into a form that like tells people that's worth the pain of seeking. It still is there. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's all perfect, but like I just am a nerd who is really, really delighted by a lot, and I want to tell people about it.
So you mentioned discovery and curiosity. You talk, and we've talked a couple times about the process of like self-discovery as like a key to actually enjoying really any lifelong work, but particularly the creative endeavors. What would you say you discovered? Like, talk about curiosity and discovery in the process of this prayer book. Like, it is it's not entirely a left turn, if you and I are honest, but like mental health, trauma, prayer book.
Yeah.
There are lots of ways in which that makes sense. I would love to hear a little bit about not just the impetus for like, hey, why write a book like this, but come through the doorway of like, what were the curiosities that drove this process for you, and were there particular moments of discovery for you, like in the process or after the fact?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, it's super fun to get to talk to you about this, because you've written prayer books. Like this is you too. And yeah, I haven't gotten to do that yet. So that'll be kind of fun to hear, I don't know, a little bit of your own answer to that too. But um I did not intend to write this book.
Okay.
So like it wasn't like the others where there's like this burning thing and I set out to do it and make it happen and secure the contract, and like it was actually just, I was trying to give myself kindness to play with words and like process my own story while writing the previous book, The Lord is My Courage, which is so much about my own like healing process with religious trauma. And so I was writing poetry and prayers to help myself process, and to also to distill down. Like poetry has a way of distilling things down to their essence. And it was part of what it was a medium that I used to help myself discern what is to share and what is simply mine.
Yes.
Because when you're telling stories, it's really hard to know like what's for thousands of people to read and what's just for you and your spouse. You know, and so poetry kind of was like this potent device that helped me distill down what am I trying to say at its essence, and like what's for me and what's for other people. So I was just writing poetry like alongside writing the chapters of The Lord is My Courage, and then like started to also write prayers with that same effect of just like trying to be in conversation with this God that I love and who called us out of darkness, really, like led us into a wilderness space that's very confusing. And I still feel like this confusion of, why does this church where we were abused still exist, and like why do the evil prosper?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was just personal. And I frankly, you know how social media works. Like when you're writing a manuscript, you don't I don't know if maybe it doesn't work this way for you, but for me, like I'm very head down. I'm like working hard every day, and there's not as much space to like come up with like an Instagram post. And so I occasionally just started sharing a couple of those pieces on Instagram, because I needed something simple to share while I was more focused on this manuscript. Just like getting to show up and still connect with people, but like not have it take so much energy.
Yep.
And people were really moved by the pieces. And at that point, I wasn't even calling it poetry. Okay. Yeah. I did not think this is poetry. I didn't think I could write poetry. Because I hadn't studied poetry, so I didn't think I knew enough about poetry to write poetry, because that's a deeply held, ingrained thing in me about competence, but that I'm working through. But yeah, just getting to like share these things, and I realized through people's feedback that these words were actually meaningful for them. And as that happened more and more, people started to be like, are you going to make a book of these? And I still was like, I'm just making simple posts. Like, I'm just like, these are just my personal, like, I'm just getting through writing an intense book. But it kept happening. And I realized, oh, well, I guess this could be for more than me. Let's explore that. And so I didn't think a publisher would go for it, but they did. And
I'm glad they did. I'm glad they did. I love your moment. They're talking about competence and poetry. Because in theory, no, in essence, like the practice of poetry as a writer has far more to do with like letting go of those expectations of competence than it does with like achieving a level of competence like that. Like there isn't a way, like here's the way to write poems. Like, I just this morning released a podcast with Scott Cairns, who's a fantastic poet. Talked with one of my favorite poets a couple weeks ago. His name is Gregory Orr, and both said something along the same lines during the interview, is that like when folks talk about writing, I even asked Professor Orr, I said, like, well, if someone asked you like how do you write a good poem, and he scoffed at the question. He's like, there's no, and it's like, oh, because there is that, like that poetry demands of us like the release of those expectations of competencies of this is what good looks like, this is what finished looks like. It actually takes our expectation and treatment of language and flips it on its head so that we get freed from like all those weird trappings.
Yes.
And so like that is exactly the moment where like, I don't think I'm good at this. You're like, okay, now we're ready to get going, because it's not really about you being good at it. It's actually about you being in it. Period. Regardless of your feelings and competencies.
Oh man, it was such a cool process to like. I'm really glad I did it in secret, so I didn't like tell my readers that I was working on this book until it was like very close to coming out. And I'm glad I did that, because I needed the time to wrestle with this and to like coax myself into showing up. To help myself feel safe, to be like, you actually can do this, you can show up. And recently my friend Suzanne Stabile was talking about with the Enneagram, you need the energy of your stress point to show up in your security point. So as a 4, I need actually the energy of 2 to show up with oneness. And so I realized like that was the process of these poems and prayers, was letting myself get over my own like lust for greatness and lust for being seen as competent and sharp from a literary perspective, and actually just fucking care for people.
Yes.
Like,
yep.
Just care for people.
Yeah.
Like the point, I did not write the Book of Common Courage for a literary critic to tell me that I'm awesome. I wrote it for a person who feels overwhelmed to feel seen and held and heard right there. And therefore my words need to be simple and need to have a clarity to them. Like it was this really cool process. Writing this book was a really cool process of getting over myself.
Yeah.
And just like letting care create more space to show up, and then like learning to receive. That's good enough.
Yeah.
That is good enough. Like that is art. Like let it be good enough. That's really it was good. So freeing.
I love that. I have a friend and mentor, and who's also like a work partner, who challenged me a few years ago. It was a challenging question. I hadn't thought about it super intentionally. But she asked, she said, you post these thoughts, some of which are prayers, every day. That's a lot. You're generating a lot. I had like made this commitment a while ago. I'm going to post something every day. And she said, so, are you conscious of, she said, what was the question? She said, like, do you keep anything for yourself? Because you talked about it a moment ago, like not dividing, but like discerning between, this is for me and my spouse. This is for me internally. This is for people who aren't me. This is for public consumption, especially if someone's got a book contract, there's money involved. Talk about that for you. How, like, what did you learn about the things that you actually take more personally, specifically with regards to prayer? It's one thing to be telling stories from our past about trauma and put it in the direction of like, here's a lesson I've learned, here's etc. Versus like, here's my prayer life, and putting that in public. What have you learned about like the things that you hold more personally precious with regards to prayer or connection with the divine, like in the process of making something for public consumption?
Yeah. I will answer that from the side, because Sunday we were together with some friends at what I am calling not church, capital N, capital C. And it's people we get together with once a month who are kind of like in the wilderness together, figuring out what does church mean to us now. If we called it a house church, I would barf. So I couldn't do it.
I get
it.
So
not church. And we were talking about prayer, and actually, okay, I'm gonna read a quote.
Yeah, please.
So this was like our prompt for discussion from Brother Lawrence. I have abandoned all particular forms of devotion, all prayer techniques. My only prayer practice is attention. I carry on a habitual, silent, and secret conversation with God that fills me with overwhelming joy.
Yeah.
And I laughed while reflecting on that with my friends, because I was like, what's hilarious is at the point of that conversation, the book was 1 week from release. And I was like, I have a book coming out next week, a book of prayers. But really, like, my personal prayer practice is actually wordlessness.
Yes.
It's just paying attention. And it's being in this room that I'm talking to you from, and like laying down. I have this bolster that I lay down on. I'm working on like opening up my heart, physically like the posture. So the point of that story is what's personal and not for as much public consumption is just, it's this daily practice of quiet, of silence. And these words in the Book of Common Courage, they actually welled up out of wordlessness. So I'm glad I wrote it, even though I believe really at its heart, prayer is paying attention. I think these are words that help us pay attention and might welcome us to pay attention to our surroundings and to ourselves, as though there's actually goodness here. But really they started with like this daily practice of getting still and getting quiet, or going on a walk and like looking around me. And that you don't really, I don't know, that's, you can't, that's a daily thing that it's hard to put words to, but also I don't want to go, I'm not going to go say on social media every day, I just did centering prayer. Like that, it's just not that. I don't know.
It's icky.
I don't know if
that would be legitimately icky. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but
it totally does.
That's what my prayer life really is.
And it is a
silence.
That's very much been my experience. And the cheap way to say it is like, ain't that a trip? That, and yet it makes it, well, it is a bit of a trip, but it makes a truckload of sense. So the opening line to the Tao Te Ching reads, "The name that can be named is not the eternal name." And I remember in high school reading that for the first time and thinking like, that's so cool. And I was just captured by the notion that the name that can be named is not the eternal name. Oh yeah. It's very Enneagram 4, kind of like, don't put a label on me. And and which is like me being in a jackass about like literally ancient wisdom. I'm like, that's so cool. Put it on a hat. But
hilarious. I would have done the same thing.
But one of the things that I don't know, I think I can say discovered or like was clarified for me in the process of like the initial the kind of lead up to putting together a collection of prayers to write an actual prayer book, was that the moment I could articulate a thing and know that I had articulated something and like put it together to be handed over to somebody, it didn't feel, and it wasn't a negative experience. It didn't feel like prayer to, like, I knew it was a prayer, but it didn't feel like prayer to me.
Yeah.
And initially, like, that was just an art process experience. Post the second prayer book and that conversation with Donna, who's the person who challenged me about like when you were like, what do you keep for yourself? Part of what I've come to is like that what I'm really discovering though then in that is that if I can get my head around it, then it's about God. That's about God. That's not God. If I can get my head around it, that's about God. I can, and again, back to the Tao would talk about these, the 10,000 things, and they're all manifestations. And if I pay too much attention to them, they're really distractions. If I know it's a distraction from what's real, then when I'm really discovering that this is what's real, and what's real, I can't get my head around that. And boy, that's actually a wonderful feeling of like, there's actually like that God must be, therefore like more than I can name. And like, oh, okay, that's actually a much happier place for me to be in as a devotionalist, as someone who wants to connect with the divine, is like, it's going to be bigger than me. It's going to be broader. And if I can make something of it, then that's a tool or that's about God, but that's not the divine. Oh, it was a really freeing experience. It sounds like you're having a bit of that same kind of like, I don't know what I want. I don't know that even with church, like I want to be with people. I want to have conversations. I don't think I want to. I don't think I want to know what this thing is. I think I want to. I want this to be kind of like an open space. And as soon as we call it something, I think we might have fucked it up. And I don't want to.
We might have limited it unnecessarily. Yeah. What's coming to mind as you talk is I talk about in this book how like when we're experiencing trauma, when we're experiencing overwhelm, we are our body springs into action to protect us from harm, and we are temporarily disconnected from the language centers of our brains. So we experience this wordlessness. We struggle to make sense of what's happening. And I think what I am really amazed by in this moment is that, like, I think what I'm trying to welcome people into is first to be able to experience a withness with being with in their wordlessness, that like it's okay to be there where you can't make sense of your story and you don't know how to where God is in this, to be able to like integrate that into words. I'm actually trying to lead people from wordlessness with withness, being witness, being having a sense of connection, into words, so that we can go back to wordlessness. Like to be able to go back to that, I can be silent and it's not scary.
Yes.
Like God is just with me all the time.
Which also means I can be silent and it can be nameless, and that can no longer be scary. And when I am using words, that doesn't have to be scary either, because if I put a name on something, I just don't feel the same attachment to it. Where like now I've made a declaration and have to build an empire around it. Like, okay,
right.
This is maybe this much of the whole of the thing. I feel freer to use language because I don't think I'm not gonna capture all of this in a bottle.
Yeah.
And then
like I don't have to get it right.
I don't have to get it right.
I get to be in dialogue with this God who's really present and really with me.
Talk about your relationship to and with the natural world. You get outdoors a lot. One of our I help lead this series of retreats for like long-term church religious work type people. And one of the experiences we've offered is they take this walk in the redwoods. It's, and first of all, it's and this is not, I'm not being mean when I say this, but it is amazing how little exposure ye average human has to like the wild, to the natural world. Yes. Like folks who get around the redwoods and will come back from this walk and they'll say several things. The first of which is almost always like, I just don't get outside enough, which is like, dang, that's crazy. Like, you know, like it's all out. It's right there. It's like, it's on the other side of the door all the time. But the talk about being in a place in which, one specific gentleman said, I felt like I was being acted on. That like in most of my scenarios, like I've got my computer, I've got my phone, I have all these tools of control. When I get into nature and into the natural world, it's like its rhythms, the breeze, the sound, the sun, it is acting on me. And all I can actually do is simply receive that. And he said, I'm never in that posture. Talk about your relationship with the natural world as a practice. It's a choice you make. It's a thing you want to do, but it's a choice you make and a practice. Talk about that like as a transformative experience, like making a practice of it. How significant is that for you?
Yeah. Yesterday I was listening to a class by a woman named Ruby Gibson, and she said something like, in trauma is a loss of voice, choice, and power. And healing is reclaiming our voice, choice, and power. And there, for me, to choose to go outside and give my attention to something outside of myself is healing over and over again. And then as just like a really nerdy person, I know that when I walk that I'm going to experience something called optic flow, which is going to help my whole self feel more alive and good and grounded and hopeful. Like I know too much about how our bodies work in relationship to the environment to like give up the practice of going outside, that it just like it works. It affects us in deep ways. It heals us to be outside, heals the nervous system. So but my relationship, it's really funny that you brought up the redwoods, actually. Not funny, it's beautiful. I over Christmas was visiting my family, and for Christmas my mom got my dad digitized our VHS tapes of like family home videos.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and
that's
so
a pretty sweet gift.
It was a really cool gift. Yeah. And we were sitting around watching. I had gone to bed and my dad texted and was like, you have to come up here, there's video of the redwoods. And they know that I'm doing a lot of work around national parks right now with a project I'm doing next. And so it's like, oh my gosh, okay. So I went upstairs. I hadn't fallen asleep yet, and I got to see video of little tiny me. Like I must have been 6, I don't know. It was really little. In Redwoods National Park, and I was like, I saw the seeds of who I am today on the screen of this little girl who was just delighted by my surroundings. And I was like, look, I found a banana slug. Look at this. And I was like showing all my family members, look at that color. And I was pointing out just the small minutia of our environment. And that's literally what I do for a job now is I say, look at this.
Yeah.
It's astounding. That's what I do for a living. That's my vocation. And it was just really cool to see that my relationship with nature started so long ago, and it fed me then and it feeds me now. I think of that person that went on your retreat and how he said he was being acted on. Like I love to go outside. I'm consenting to be acted on. That's like, for a trauma survivor, that's an act of big trust.
Yeah.
That like I am gonna consent to let the world affect me, and that I could trust that it will affect me in a good way.
Yeah.
And it will. Like this morning I was reading about petrichor, the scent that happens when
after rain.
After rain, when the land has been dry for a long time and then suddenly it rains, and it's in part the scent of ozone coming down from much higher in the atmosphere, but it's also the release of a chemical called geosmin in plants. And so the oils in the plants are being released, and that's dispersed in the air in a way that is communicating to these other animals of like, there's nutrients here, you can come out. And it's like a little
party. It's like a little celebration.
It's like a little party. Petrichor. Yes, and it is, if you people listening, like that's the name for the scent that really beautiful scent that you smell when it's rained after a long time of not raining. And there's that delightful smell, I say that because it's like nature's always communicating like that through the release of these chemicals and through the wind. And I think going outside and making it a habit to be acted upon, it's a practice of interdependence. It's a consent to saying, I am not just me, I am part of this.
Yes.
And I will be affected by this, and that will be a good thing.
Yeah.
And like, I actually need to be acted upon by my natural environment in order to be well and whole. Yeah. I need to smell petrichor to be a person, you know? Yeah. So
I like that you point out that it is an act of trust to allow nature to act on you, especially because as my son pointed out, he said, you know, every scene I see online of nature is like a shark attacking someone or like some rogue bear. Like this is people's, like if your entire experience of nature is like somehow through this thing, it's all it's all sharks, and they're all coming. Like it's just sharks chasing people down, and the you know, the occasional rogue bear. It's all violence, which is not true, but there's more to it than that. I would love to. We need to wrap this up in a couple minutes, but if there's a piece from the new book you would be open to reading that you would feel like, hey, this is reflective, I love to land there.
Yeah.
Before we get there,
for one.
Yeah, that's great. Like two semi-quick questions ish. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the book I'm dropping in May. The book is about the rhythm and tension between work and rest. And part of why I asked you earlier about like your pace now is because you're someone who values rest intentionally. Knowing what work looks like over the next 5 years, and your work life having like evolved a little bit.
Evolved a lot. Yeah.
How has rest evolved? Because it becomes more of a choice, like with our work lives, especially once we've got book contracts and clients. To some degree, the world around us, our work world, will say this is where to show up, and our responsibility is to say yes to other people. Our rest life becomes then a very different choice where we have to say yes in a different way. So talk about your practice of rest, how that's evolved or is evolving now.
Yeah.
In light of knowing as much as you do about what work looks like.
Yeah. The beginning of my answer is about work, in that like it's been a transition of like writing books is my job. Like so I treat it so progressively through these, you know, last 3 books, releasing these books is more and more treating it like a job, treating it like if I had a office job, I would go into work and I would leave work, like giving myself limits around when am I working and when am I not, which is a very fluid, strange thing when you're a poet and you're like, with the kind of work we do, because it's personal and it's about like paying attention to our surroundings and then translating that into words. But like having more limits, boundaries with myself around you stop working at the end of the day. You don't just work all evening, and you get the hell off social media and you take days off. That's been important. So I would say like the gift and the luxury of being given the chance to let writing be my job, let writing books be my work, and not just an extra, is that I also then have to take rest more seriously. I have to make sure that I am resting and that I am taking a Sabbath. And like over the fall, summer through fall, I got into foraging for mushrooms and like joined my mycological society locally, and it was the most it was the best thing I've done for myself in years. Like to get into this practice of just walking in the woods for hours and hours, at least once a week, sometimes more, because I love it so much.
Yeah.
And just pay attention to small, tiny things.
That's good. I like the distinction there with like when you make like a joyous practice a work, when it becomes a job of work, you then have to really intentionalize and reapproach your practice of rest. Like, this was a joyful practice, poetry, writing. It's now a job. So that's now like, as much as I like it
still brings me joy, but it can't.
But you have to now. And so you have to then somehow refill that space and intentionally reapproach your practice of rest and find other things that are not this thing anymore.
Yeah, that I have to be really, I have to have boundaries with myself that I am not always producing.
Yes.
Or I am not always, I don't know, like I have to have enough room in my life. And I would say, to be frank, like currently right now with book release season, I'm keeping room. Like, I'm going cross country skiing on Saturday. Yeah. And I was like, I'm really glad I made the choice to go do that with a friend.
Yeah.
And because I knew, like, my 4 weeks ago self who made the plan was like, you're going to need to take a break. You're going to need to go be outside and shut your mouth and stop talking about yourself in your book for a day. But you know, that's not necessarily enough, but I think I need spaces where I'm silent. I need spaces where I don't have to say things that are for other people, but I'm just there. So it's just more important. It's like I think I have a high responsibility to slow down and get silent because of how much I've chosen to write.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Love it answer. Have you found a piece you'd be happy to?
Yeah, it's not necessarily a piece that's more about nature, mostly because I wanted to pay attention to what you were saying. But it's a piece this is one of my favorite pieces in the book.
Great.
So, you know, it'll work.
Good.
This is a poem. I didn't title my pieces don't have titles, which was a kind of intentional choice.
Love it.
So to set it up, this is really about my relationship with my body and how I learned to treat myself as someone who grew up in evangelicalism.
Fantastic.
Okay. All right. Religion said sanctification meant making myself small. The church handed me scissors and commanded, get to work. Cut away all the parts of you that are flesh. I became more scissors than a self. I swallowed a story of war as grace. I made my mind a general, barking orders to march hard. I declared corporeal war for spiritual gain. Truth against tissue, faith against fear, holiness against the heart. I named my skin an enemy to subjugate, my feelings foes to fight, my desires rivals to oppose. I marched until I collapsed. What good is a Christian soldier marching as to war with the cross of Jesus crushing them into the floor? My body was never territory to colonize. But down on the ground, in the dirt, in the grime, I could see past the lies to a riven side. Holes in hands spoke peace to mine. The scissors were never spiritual. The war was never divine. The truth was that this body was already a place with holiness inside. Sanctification is like stitching the sinew to the soul, and grace is but a thread sewing mind and body whole. The body is not a barrier between the Bible and belief. It is the tissue where tenderness can speak the truth in relief. Your body is already the beloved dwelling place of God.
Fantastic.
Thanks for letting me share.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for doing so. Thanks for your time this morning.
Likewise. This was a delight. It was so fun.
And thank you for joining me on this episode of the At Sea podcast. If you would like to dig into that book that KJ Ramsay and I talked about, it is called The Book of Common Courage, Prayers and Poems to Find Strength in Small Moments. It's a beautiful volume. You can find that really anywhere you buy books. I prefer heartsandmindsbooks.com and buy it directly from Byron. Or if you would like to be one of the persons who helps make this podcast happen, we would love to have you on the team. Just visit us at patreon.com/Justin McRoberts. We'll see you there. Until next time.